Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today we're going to be dividing fractions and reducing to lowest terms. So this is very similar to multiplying and then reducing to lowest terms. The only difference is that in order to switch from division to multiplication, we must take for the reciprocal of the fraction and then multiply and then simplify. So we'll go over all the steps for multiplying and simplifying here today a little bit, but do make sure that you've seen the previous lesson on how to do this because the previous lesson was all about that. Today's lesson is going to be a bit about that too, but mostly about that first step of taking the reciprocal. So here's the first one. It says 3 over 4 divided by 4 over 5 is equal to what? Well, what they did is they took the second one and took the reciprocal. So what does that mean? They just switched these two numbers, right? They put the numerator in the denominator spot and the denominator in the numerator spot. So 4 over 5 became 5 over 4. So they just swapped the two numbers. And then they also changed the division to multiplication. So if we take the reciprocal of that second fraction, we're able to do this, is the rule. And then they multiplied it out. They said, well, 3 times 5 is 15, 4 times 4 is 16. And then they concluded that there is no way to reduce 15 over 16 to anything lower than that, which it's true, there certainly isn't. And so they just left it as is, as 15 over 16. Okay. It says here, the reciprocal is 4 over 5. 4 over 5 is 5 over 4. When you multiply fractions, it's easy to divide fractions. And what they mean by that is dividing fractions on its own is tricky, but if we just remember that we can multiply and just take the reciprocal, it makes it a lot more easy. And so that's how we're going to do it today. Okay, so here's the first one. It says 3 over 5 divided by 1/2 equals what? Well, that's the same as 3 over 5 times 2 over 1, right? For 1/2, we just change it to 2 over 1. And then we multiply through. 3 times 2 is 6, and 5 times 1 is 5. Now, 6 over 5 can't be reduced any further, right? They're too similar in value to have any common factor other than 1, and so we can just leave as is. It's already in its lowest terms. All right, and let's try another one. Number 2 says 3 over 4 divided by 2 over 3 is what? Well, first we need to say that this is equal to 3 over 4 times 3 over 2, right? Because the second one, we're swapping the numerator and denominator. And then we're going to multiply across. So 3 times 3 is 9, and 4 times 2 is 8. And same thing, 9 over 8 can't be reduced any further, so it's just 9 over 8 still. Then we have 2/3 divided by 1/6. So what is that? That is the same as 2/3 times 6 over 1. So 2 times 6 is 12, and 3 times 1 is 3. So 12 over 3 would just be 4 over 1, right? Or just 4, we could even say. Would be even better, because we can divide 12 and 3 by 3 and get 4 over 1, or 4. Good. Okay, what about number 4? Here it says 4 over 5 divided by 2 over 7. Well, let's do that. Let's do 7 over 2 instead of 2 over 7, because that's our reciprocal. And then we get 28 over 10. Now, this can be reduced further. Let's take the smaller of those numbers and say, what is the greatest common factor of 10, and will that work for 28? Well, the greatest factor of 10 is 10 itself, and 10 will not work for 28. Now, what about 5? Will 5 work for 28? No, it will not. What about 2? Will 2 work for 28? Yes, it will, and that's the only common factor they have other than 1, and so it's their greatest common factor. So if we divide both by 2, we'll get 14 over 5, and that is lowest terms. Later on, we'll talk about actually how to take an improper fraction to a mixed number, but for today, this is good. We can just leave it as an improper fraction. Okay, let's try this one. 7 over 10 divided by 1/5. Well, that's the same as 7 over 10 times 5 over 1, which is 35 over 10. Good. Okay. And what's our greatest common factor of 35 and 10? The greatest factor of 10 is just 10, but that won't work for 35. The next greatest factor would be 5, and 5 does work for both 10 and 35. So if we divide 35 by 5, we get 35 divided by 5 is 7, 10 divided by 5 is 2. So 7 over 2 is our answer. Good. Okay. Let's try the next one. 2 over 4 divided by 1 over 8. So that's 2 over 4 times 8 over 1. So 2 times 8 is 16, and 4 times 1 is 4. And 16 divided by 4, well, that's actually evenly divisible, and that would just be 4 or 4 over 1. Very good. All right, let's try number 7. 4 over 8 divided by 1 over 12. That's the same as 4 over 8 divided by 12 over 1. And let's see, 12 times 4 is 48, and 8 times 1 is 8. So let's see, what's the greatest common factor of them both? Well, it would be 8, right? Greatest factor of 8 is just 8 itself, and that does also work for 48. So the answer is just going to be 6 over 1, or just 6. Okay, let's try number 8. 3 over 10 divided by 3 over 4. Well, that's 3 over 10 times 4 over 3. Well, 3 times 4 is 12, and 10 times 3 is 30. So we have 12 over 30. Now, what's the greatest factor of 12? Well, that would be 12, but that's not going to be a factor of 30 as well. What's the second greatest factor of 12? That would be 6. And 6 also is a factor of 30, so that's going to work for us. So if we divide by 6, we get 2 over 5, and that's our lowest terms. Very good. Okay, let's do number 9. Number 9 says 4 over 5 divided by 1 over 2. Well, that's 4 over 5 times 2 over 1. So that's going to be 8 over 5, and that cannot be reduced further, right? Both 5 is a prime factor, right? 5 is a prime number, so it's only divisible by 1 and itself, 5, and 8 does not have 5 in common, as a factor, and so that's not going to work. 8 itself is not prime, but, 2 and 4 don't go into 5, right? Because 5 is prime, so yeah. Okay, let's try this last one here. We have 7 over 12 divided by 7 over 9. So that's 7 over 12 times 9 over 7, which is going to be, let's see, 9 times 7 is 63, and 12 times 7, I'm not sure. Let's find out. It's 84. Okay, so do these numbers have any common factors? On one hand, it seems like, oh, it's really big numbers, so they should. But on the other hand, sometimes big numbers don't always mean we can reduce it. Now, in this case, I do think we can reduce it. What's the greatest factor of 63? Well, it's 63 itself. Now, unfortunately, that isn't going to work. The next biggest factor will be, well, let's see, it's not divisible by 2, but it is divisible by 3, so it would be 21 would be the next one, right? Because 21 times 3 gives us 63, and 21 also works for 84. So if we divide both of these by 21, we will get 3 over 4, and that's our lowest terms. Very good. All right, well, that is it for dividing fractions and reducing to lowest terms. I hope you enjoyed this one. The great thing with this is that if you are really comfortable multiplying fractions and reducing those to lowest terms, this is not much different from that. This is not much harder because all you have to do is just remember to take a reciprocal and then do the exact same steps we did in the last session, okay? So if the reciprocal part was difficult, all it is really is just, flip the number, right? Put the top on the bottom, bottom on the top for the second number, and that's all there is to it. If it was the other parts troubling you, I would advise to go back, make sure that you're comfortable with the multiplying fractions and reducing to lowest terms lesson because it is talked about in more detail there. All right, but with that said, that's everything for today, and we'll see everybody for the next class. Bye, everyone.